Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel Stewart Paintings. On today's easy acrylic painting tutorial we're going to learn how to paint this sunset desert scene. I'm going to teach you how to mix colours very easily and how to use these colours to push things far off into the distance like mountains, how to add highlights over the top, super easy, and then how to do the same tricks on things like terrain and grass to make things look far away or close to the viewer, and then lastly how to put some detail over the top with different types of brushes to paint cactuses and bushes to make sure your landscape painting for beginners is really easy. So let's get into it. So a nice and easy tutorial today. You're going to need the following colours. They are titanium white, cad yellow, cad orange, rose pink, cad red, iris purple, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, chromium oxide, green, burnt umber, warm grey and ivory black. Now I've got a little canvas that I've stained raw sienna and I've used chalk just to get an outline. The reason I've used chalk is just because it doesn't leave any horrible pencil marks, and because we're going to paint a pastel sunset I don't want it mixing into my lovely pastel paints. We're going to have a sunset in the background. We're going to have some mountains off into the distance. This one we're going to have a bit nearer and these ones we're going to push back, and then we're going to have some terrain and we're going to have some canvases. So if you'd like to pause the video and copy down the outline, feel free, but you don't have to. I'm going to show you step by step how we're going to paint the scene. So the first things first, we're going to paint the sunset. So don't worry if you paint over your chalk. The great thing about chalk is you can just wipe it away and paint over it. So at the bottom of our sunset we're going to create a cool colour. So we're going to get some ultramarine blue and lots and lots of white to make it really nice and pastel. And we should get this lovely cool blue. We can add a little bit of this cool purple called iris purple, like your eye and iris. And we're going to add some pink. If you don't have iris purple, you can just add a little bit of normal purple and a little bit of pink and white. And you just want to make a cool bluey purple. So ultramarine blue is a dark blue. So just make sure you have a little bit more than purple and pink. And you should get this sort of dark purpley lavender colour. And what we're going to do, just around our little hills in the background, we're just going to make the bottom of our sunset this nice cool blue. And this is just going to peek up between some of our cactuses. And this is just going to be where the sun is going down towards these canyons. And it's just creating a nice cool sunset. So now we've got our lovely blue. We're going to go into rose pink, which is this lovely pink. We're going to do the same trick. We're just going to add lots of pink and we're going to add loads of white to make it lovely and pastel. You can mix it slightly into the previous colour just so it's got a hint of it. And all we're going to do, if you imagine we're getting a little bit warmer as we're going towards that sun, we're just going to create another line. So about an inch thick. And you can gently blend it into the previous colour. So all I'm doing, look, I'm just going back and forth really gently, just blending it. And all we're going to do is just try to work on our transitions so we don't have a big jump in colour. So look, you don't really notice because we've blended it, one jump to another. So now we're going to get a little bit warmer because it's going to be where our sun's going to be. So we're just adding some lovely orange and we're just going to add loads of white again to make it pastel. So it's the same trick every time. And a tiny bit of pink, just so there's not enough really huge jump from pink to orange. So by adding a little bit of pink, the previous colour, let's add more white. We can make it really nice and pastel, kind of like a peach colour. And again, look, we're going to do a big block, again about an inch. And we'll go around this sort of canyon here. And again, we're going to create these X shapes, look, with our brush and gently blend into the previous colour. So what we don't want is big jumps between the colours, because if you ever look at a sky you don't really notice the change in colour. So by just creating X shapes with your brush and just easing up on the pressure, look, as we come down we can make these lovely sort of blends. And if you do have a big jump like me, you can do this trick. Look, you can go back to the previous colour and do your X shapes, look, and just go upwards and blend it. And it should, in about 2 minutes, be much more blended and you don't notice the horrible jump in colour. So if you're painting along at home, obviously this is a tutorial for beginners, but if you do find it's going too fast, the great thing about YouTube is you can pause me and you can just go at your own speed. And if you find that I'm going too slow because you're a bit more advanced, you can always fast forward bits and go a little bit speedier. So we're going to add some cad yellow now and loads and loads of white, and we're going to do the same trick. So we're getting a really nice pastel yellow, kind of like a Naples yellow. I'm going to steal a little bit of the previous colour and just mix it in. And again, look, same trick. So we're just doing the same thing over and over again. So it's really easy. You just want to take your time. If you notice a jump in the colour, just go back and blend it. And as I say, you can always go back to the previous colour. And if you find the thing with acrylics, sometimes because they're water-based, you sometimes need to do 2 coats of paint. That's quite normal, because sometimes when you put too much water on your brush, you can get streak marks on your canvas. So if you ever do find that, just let your painting dry for a little bit and thicken up the paint, have less water on your brush, and just give it another coat of paint. So there we go. So we've gone from purpley blue to pink to orange to yellow, and then I'm just going to go back to the previous colour. I'm just going to blend it slightly here so there's not so much of a jump. So as I say, look, if you notice a jump, you can just go back to sections and you can just neaten anything up. There's no rush, take your time. And then as we go up, you can't really go from blue to yellow, because if we do that, we're going to get green. So I'm going to show you, look, if you get cerulean blue and you mix it into yellow, it starts turning green. So let's add some white. Can you see that? It starts turning like a greeny turquoise, and you don't really see a green sky, so we don't want to do that. So I'm just showing you as an example. So what we're going to do, we're going to get rid of that colour. We're just going to add loads and loads of white to it. I've let it dry so it's not polluting my brush. So I'm just getting loads and loads of white, and I'm not mixing it into the yellow. Can you see I've left a little gap? And then I'm just going to get some cerulean blue. So all I'm doing is I've put 95% white and just 5% cerulean blue. So it's mainly all white. And it's just got a hint of blue just to make it off-white. And I'm just going to create a sort of divide between the yellow and my darker blue that I'm going to add in a minute. Can you see now, because the white paint is almost transparent, you can see some of my canvas underneath. Now, the reason I painted my canvas raw sienna is because when I'm painting a pastel sunset, I like to put a dark colour underneath, and you can see, look, you can see where you need to thicken up the paint, because sometimes when you paint on a white canvas, you won't notice it. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to dry it with a hairdryer, look, and I'm just going to reapply some thicker paint. I'm going to have less water on my brush. So this is what I was just saying earlier. I'm just going to mix some more of that paint because it's dried. So all I've got is some white and a tiny bit of cerulean blue, just a tiny bit, look. But it's mainly all white. I'm going to add a tiny bit of yellow, just a tiny dot. I'm going to be brave. I don't want it to turn green, so just literally a dot, like a pinprick. And if you give your work a second coat of paint, it will just get rid of all those horrible brush marks. And again, look, if you dry your work and get a clean brush, so I've dried this, now I can work that yellow into some dry paint. So this white and blue that's above it that I'm doing my X shapes into is dry. So I've wrote that at the bottom. Please dry your work before doing this, because if you do have wet paint, yellow and white and blue will kind of make a green colour. Excuse the focus, it's because I'm leaning in front of it. So by just drying your work, acrylics, you can just use a hairdryer, and then just getting some of that lovely yellow and white, look, you can just blend it and make it look really soft and natural. So that's what I'm saying, take your time, you don't have to go as fast as this video, pause it, dry your work, take your time. Now I've got a clean brush, I haven't got yellow on my brush, I've got white, and I'm just adding a little bit more cerulean blue this time. So I've got a clean brush, again, I don't want to get green. And all I'm doing, I'm using white and a little bit more cerulean blue to darken my corners and the top of my painting. So again, look, if you have to do 2 coats of paint, Sometimes you do. You don't have to paint your canvas. As I say, look, that's just the blending. So that's just to show you the different colours we've mixed. You don't have to paint your canvas raw sienna. It's an old artist trick, but you don't have to do that at home if you don't feel comfortable. But as I say, it's a good trick because what it does is it shows you where you've missed areas and where your paint is thin, so you can thicken the paint and put a second coat of paint over. So it just saves you later on. The worst thing is if you were going to cover this up with a cloud or some detail and you finish the paint and you've noticed areas, it doesn't look very nice. So look, we've got these jumps in colour and we've got this dark blue at the top to frame our painting, and it should look like a lovely sunset. Really, really easy, perfect for beginners. Just some blending and some colour mixing, nothing too hard. So now we're going to work on pushing these mountains back really, really far, and we're going to use colour to do that. So we're going to use colours to make this warm grey. I've got it pre-mixed. All you use is black, a little bit of orange and some white. So black, a little bit of orange and some white. And you should get this dark grey. And all we're going to do, we're going to add some purple to the grey. Now, iris purple is purple and cobalt blue and a bit of pink and a little bit of white if you haven't got that at home. So all we're doing, we're making warm grey. We're adding a tiny bit of purple and some ultramarine blue. And we're going to add some white to it to make it a bit more pastel. So warm grey, ultramarine blue, a little dot of purple and white. And you should get this bluey grey colour. And we're going to put plenty of white in it. We want it lighter than we think. And we're going to try it out. Now the reason we're using, let's add a little bit more purple. The reason we're using this lighter colour is because we want to push these mountains far off into the distance. So we use lighter colours to create perspective and make things look far away. So we'll test it. Sometimes you mix it on your palette and then when you put it on your canvas it looks a little bit too dark. So I think using this nice little thin brush, I think it's just a little bit too dark. So I think rather than not waste the paint, I want to have a big sort of bank, like a big rocky bank here. So why not, let's use this colour and bring this bank a bit forward. So let's use all that paint I've just mixed. I don't want to waste it. And all I'm going to do, look, I'm using my brush to create kind of sharp edges because I want it to look quite rocky. And this could be like a big mountainous cliff. And we're going to just block it in with this really nice dark sort of silhouette colour. But we don't want to use just jet black or a really, really dark colour because we want to push these mountains back off into the distance. So we want to save our darkest colours to things that are really close to the viewer. So these things are really far away, so we don't want them too dark. So there we go, look, we'll just block her in. Don't worry if your horizon's not perfectly straight. Doesn't matter, we're going to have bits and bobs. And then this one, why don't we add loads of white to the remaining paint so we don't waste it, to make it lighter. Let's add some more blue to make it still very pastel, and some purple, and just plenty more white to make it a lot softer and a lot less harsh. So there we go. So it's the same colour, it's just got a lot more white. There we go. So we're just making a nice cool grey, but it's got so much more white in it now, it's a lot softer, isn't it? And what that should do is it should make it look, when we zoom out in a minute, that these mountains are really, really far away in the distance, like canyons. And then this one to the left is sort of nearer to the viewer. And this just creates perspective. And all it is just one's a lighter shade and one's a darker shade. So if you're following along at home, you can use this trick for anything. You can use this for buildings, people. It's just knowing how to do it and watching someone like me to teach you. And then once you know how to do it, it's fantastic. You can do this on all your paintings. So there we go. So let's just block in this corner. It's much easier if you use a smaller brush because you can get into all these little crevices. There we go. And then why not? Let's use some of the remaining darker shade. So let's get some of the darker grey. And let's have some boulders that soar off into the distance. I used to love this little 80s horror film called Tremors when I was young. About killer worms. They used to come out the desert, and it reminds me of this. And they always had to jump on these big boulders to run away. So why not let's have some boulders. Just a crazy flashback I'm having while I'm painting. So there we go. So look, we can just have some rocks off into the distance. There we go. So now we've zoomed in. Look at that. That looks nearer and they look further away. And look how realistic that looks. Now why don't we get a clean brush and we get some of our pastel orange that's still left. So all that was white, orange and a tiny bit of pink. So white, orange and a tiny bit of pink. We've got a clean brush. And let's just do a big circle. And this could be our setting sun. So I want to put it just really low. Just so the sun's sort of glowing above these little canyons. There we go. Now, as I said, acrylics, because they're water-based, sometimes they absorb the colour that's underneath them. So this looks really nice and vibrant, but it might dry a bit darker because we've got that cool purple underneath. So worst comes to worst, we can always go over it later if it dries a bit flat. So I'm going to get some of this orange that we've mixed up, that we just used for the sun. And I'm going to create some highlights on my canyons. So all I'm doing, look, I'm leaving gaps. I'm using a fine liner brush. And I'm just leaving gaps in this dark grey behind it. And that's going to look like the contrast between highlights and shadows. So again, look, I want to create some sharp edges to create like sharp boulders and terrain. So there we go. So if I zoom in for you so you can see it a bit easier. Hope that's better for you at home. So look, all I'm doing, I'm leaving plenty of gaps so that dark grey looks like shadows. And I'm just creating random shapes to look like rocks and boulders. And if you thicken up the paint, look, if you thicken up the paint, you can have really high, sharp highlights that are really bright. So these could be areas that are getting some of that sunlight. And if you kind of let the paint run off your brush, you can get softer ones. So just think where you want the light to be. And if you don't want them too harsh, look, just have hardly any paint off your brush. And just have them sort of fading off into the dark. Now here on the left, it's going to be a little bit darker than in the right because it's further away from the sun. So I've got hardly any paint on my brush, look. And I'm just letting just a tiny imprint sort of come off my brush onto the canvas. Look, I've got hardly any paint. And whatever's left, I'm just scraping against the canvas. And that just looks like some highlights fading off into the distance. And you can always smudge it with your finger. So let's make this area just a little bit brighter because this would be getting a little bit more sun than the left hand side. So I'm just going to colour that area in. We're going to have a cactus sort of going across it, but don't worry. So as I say, it's just to show you, look, you can shade areas, you can leave areas in the dark. And look, we can even put some highlights on our boulders just to give them a little bit of added detail. I'm not going to go wild because I just want this tutorial just be for beginners, just be really nice and easy. But the only difference between a beginner's painting and a more advanced painting is just spending the time on every section. So there we go, look, that looks fantabby-dozy, that looks groovy. And I'm just going to get some white and some of my orange. I'm just going to remake it because my palette's dried a bit. If you find your acrylics dry very quickly, you can use a mist bottle that you use to spray plants. That's a good way of spraying your colours so they don't dry. So what you spray a plant with, just a mist bottle. So look, all I'm doing, I'm going over my sun for a second time just to make it look more vibrant. So I'm just creating a little circle, a little orangey circle. So now we should have these pushback mounds, we should have this lovely canyon, and before we put our cactuses on our painting, what we're going to do, we're going to block in our floor, so our desert floor, and we're going to mix this colour that I've got pre-mixed, and all it is raw umber brown, and lots of white, and a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. So raw umber brown, lots and lots of white, and a tiny bit of ultramarine blue, and you should get this sort of pastel blue. We're going to make two shades of it. We're going to have one shade where we're going to add some of our grey to it to make it nice and dark. So all we're doing is mixing white, grey, burnt umber, and a little bit of ultramarine blue, and it should turn it more dark and greyer. So all we're doing, we're just adding blues and greys to make an area cooler. Still got plenty of white in there and some raw umber brown, and we should get a nice browny grey. Now we're going to be furthest from the sunlight here in the corners, and just like we've done at the top of our painting, we want to frame our painting, so we want to make our corners nice and dark. So we're going to do the exact same thing at the bottom of our painting, because if you imagine that sun, which is the light source, is really far away from us. So this bottom corner is going to be nice and dark. So by painting this nice dark colour, we can frame the painting and get the viewer to look towards the sun. And it just looks more realistic. So we're going to make the bottom sort of half nice and dark. So just create sort of roughly a straight line. There we go. Just block her in. And then nearer the sun, it's going to be a little bit lighter. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the lighter shade. So all that is burnt umber, white, and a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. And we're just going to use the lighter shade, and we're just going to block the top off. And again, you just want to blend it as you come down, just like you did with your sky. And try work on the transitions. If you want, look, I've left a little gap where I'm going to have a cactus. If you've got an outline, you can always go around it, but don't worry if you haven't, you can just paint your cactuses over the top. The really great thing about chalk, if you're ever planning a painting out, say you were to add a person or a car or whatever you wanted to do, chalk is fantastic for using on canvas because you can just draw all over your work and it leaves no marks, and you can just rub it off with a wet finger or a baby wipe. So it's really, really good for planning things out. And especially if you're using things like pastel colours like we've used in the sunset, you're not getting paint mixed with a pencil, and it makes your colours look all dirty. So it's just a really good thing, and it's very cheap. So a pack of chalk, children's chalk, £1 or $1. So it's great. So there we go. And look, because there's a big jump, what we're going to do, look, we're just going to blend her really gently, just so you don't notice. Easy peasy. Such an easy tutorial, this one. And it looks so real, that's what's so great about it. So now, let's get a little bit of pink, and let's just mix it into our light brown. And let's just have a little hue of light, just sort of little hum of light, just where the sun is setting, and just creating a nice glow on our desert floor. So again, just blending it, just working out where that light's coming. Really, really soft. And now the fun bit, we're going to start adding some terrain. So we're going to get this chromium oxide green. You can use sap green or dark green if you want to. And all we're going to do, we're going to mix it into our brown and white and grey. And we're going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue. So what we're trying to do, we're going to by using greys and blues to our green and a bit of white, we're trying to make it more pastel and look a bit saturated, that it's got less colour in it, it's less vibrant. And by doing that, just like we've done with the mountains in the background, we're making this green look far away. And all I'm doing is I'm leaving gaps again in the underpainting to make it look like little bushes and cactuses and sort of desert plants and tufts of grass sticking out. And I've just added a tiny bit of white because I think that colour was a bit too harsh. So I'm just going over the top of it, just adding a little bit more white to make it softer, because we want this area to look far off into the distance. So a bit like our far off mountains, by adding a little bit of white and making this colour more pastel, it just looks like these tufts of grass are really far off. But again, it's just the same technique. Make sure to get plenty of paint on your brush. Leave gaps so that nice blended background colour underneath can shine through. And then it will look like terrain. See? Really, really easy. See, none of this is hard. You just got to take your time. Just do each stage the best you can do. So now as we get closer to the viewer, we're going to get darker. So all we're going to do is add more of our green and some more ultramarine blue to make it nice and dark, and a little bit of our warm grey. And then we've got a really dark moody green now, and then we're going to have these bits of grass and tufts and some cactuses here in the foreground. And because the colour is darker, it should look like they're nearer. So let's have some tufts of grass here. This could be some wild plants. Let's have some over here. And again, they're going to be dark because they're going to be further away from the sun, so they're more in the shade. So don't forget, if you're enjoying the tutorial and you find all these steps helpful, to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for everyone who's liking and subscribing. We hit over 16,000 subscribers this week, so that is fantastic. The channel is really, really growing. So thank you so much for all your continued support, and thank you for sharing the videos on Facebook and liking them on Instagram and things. And also, don't forget to tag me at mstewartpaintings with your versions of the tutorials on Facebook and Instagram, so we can shout them out and you can get credit for them, and we can stick them on our stories. So I've just stuck a little cactus, and I'm going to darken this left-hand corner because I want to sign it here. So I always try to make something dark in the left-hand corner because I want to have an area for my signature. Now, all I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a little bit of white so this colour isn't as harsh. And I'm just going to put sort of a medium green in the middle to join the far off bushes and these now harsher, darker ones. So I'm just trying to make a medium green. It's got a little bit more white in it, just to tie the two areas together so there's not so much of a jump between the really darks and the pastel ones. Now, as this is drying, I'm just going to add some yellow, some white and some green to create a lime green. So by adding yellow, white and green, you should get lime green. And I'm going to create some little cactuses here. Sometimes you get these sort of pancake sort of shaped cactuses in the desert. So I'm just going to make a few of these. And again, I'm just leaving some little gaps so some of the darker green can shine through, just so it looks like texture. But we're not going to put too much detail. We just want to insinuate where things are. But if you want to go really photorealistic at home, as I say, this tutorial's only about 45 minutes. But if you wanted to go really, really detailed, feel free to do so. So there we go, got a little cactus plant there, why not? We can add some little highlights on some of these flowers. These could be some wildflowers. And you can even have little bits of shimmering sunlight. So these are all little bits of petals and leaves getting a bit of sunlight. And by just having different shades of colour, it just makes your work look more realistic and vibrant. So let's just have a few areas, just getting a bit of highlights. As I say, we're not going to go mad. We're just going to put some bits and bobs. Don't forget, this video actually was suggested by a wonderful subscriber who wanted a desert scene painted. Don't forget, if there's anything you want to learn or you have any ideas for tutorials, and hopefully I can help, put the ideas in the comments below the videos. If there's anywhere that you would like a landscape painted or a certain scene. I'm just going to add some orange to the lime green to create a nice sort of pumpkin colour. And I'm just going to do the same. I'm just going to do, sometimes you get like dried leaves. You get areas where the it's so hot that all the wood and things is dried out, and we get that sort of lovely orangey colour. So again, we're just putting some hints of colour, just this is different bits and bobs. Yeah, so don't forget, if you have any ideas for tutorials, if there's anything you want to learn, please put them in the comments below. There is, I think, about 160, 170 tutorials now, so there's plenty to binge, and there's playlists and everything now, so you can find what you're looking for. But is there anything specific anyone wants to actually learn, just put it in the comments below. There's no bad ideas. And then we're going to swap to one of these elongated fine liners, and we're going to mix some raw umber brown, some chromium oxide green, and some warm grey. So brown, green, and warm grey. And by using one of these really elongated, really fine liners, I could do all these like sort of dead sticks and long sort of bristles of bushes and cactuses. So just having a fine liner. This one is provided by Zen Arts, who I work with. They are fantastic. If you want to have any links to the brushes, they are in the description box below. But you can just buy any old brush if you're looking to just begin. But they are fantastic because having the right equipment makes your life so much easier. So this brush, because it's got such an elongated nib, it makes doing fine detail and really sharp lines really, really easy. So again, I'm just using that dark colour just to create some shadows under my cactus and create some stones and some terrain. Let's say you don't have to go too detailed, it's up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. So let's have little bits of grass sticking up here. There we go. So I think that's enough terrain. I think that looks quite groovy. But I think because the area at the bottom is really, really dark, I'm just using my brush just to spread some areas in the middle, just to sort of tie the area together. But I think that'll do. It's got some stones and things like that. So that's looking really, really cool. And let's just mix a little bit of white. Just make it a little bit less harsh colour, and as I say, just do the same in the middle here with some stones and some bushes, just so there's not a big jump again from the lights and the darks. You're just tying areas together. We don't want any extremes. We don't want one pole being really harsh and one pole being really soft. We want to sort of mix the two together. So now everything's done. We've got all this fantastic painting blocked in. Let's paint some cactuses. So let's get some chromium oxide green. And let's get some ultramarine blue to make a really nice bluey green. So we should have a nice bluey green, like a dark green. Some warm grey, my favourite warm grey. And then we're just going to use a thicker brush, still like a fine liner, but a little bit thicker. And we're going to just create sort of rounded edges and come down. Look at that. And I'm pushing the brush. Don't worry if you get, look, some scrapes because you're painting on canvas. That's quite normal. Just thicken up your paint. Just make sure the top of your cactus is nice and round. And then just thicken up the paint and come downwards. And just paint over any gaps where you've had the paint split as it comes on the texture of the canvas. And what you want to do is just make the cactus just slightly wider at the bottom than at the top. So think of any tree trunk. The base is a little bit wider than the very top. So there we go. So if I make the top quite thin, I just want to make the bottom bit a bit fatter. So let's do a big one here. Now I don't want to do one covering up my sunset, so I'm being deliberate where I'm trying to put them. So let's have a really big one here. And the reason I'm using a really cool greeny blue is because, again, these ones are going to be far off in the shade. They're going to be much more getting less sun because they're far away from that far off distance sun. So they're quite cool. So let's just round the top bit. Don't worry if they're a bit wonky as well. You get sort of nucks and cracks on them when they get weathered and you have birds and stuff sit on them. And then let's just have some smaller ones here in the distance. Still close, they're still dark. And what I'm trying to do with the cactuses, look, I'm trying to have them at all different shapes and all different heights. They're not all in a line. So they're all like different points of view. Can you see what I'm saying? They're not all just in the same line. So these are the ones that are going to be the nearest, and that's why they're so dark. So we're just going to make sure they're all nice and round and you're happy with them. If you're ever nervous about doing this stage, you can always dry your painting before you commit to doing the cactuses. And then if you make a mistake, then your painting is still safe and dry underneath. And all I'm doing now, look, I'm going to do the sort of arms that come onto the cactus. And again, I'm going to make all of them a little bit different. I don't want them all the same. So some I'm going to give big arms. Some I'm going to have just one arm. And they should look all slightly different. So let's have a big one on this one. And let's have one here. Let's give him two, just so he's a little bit different. There we go. So we've got all these nice cactuses, but we need some sort of in the distance. So look, if I use a dark colour, it's going to bring it forwards. So what I want to do, I'm going to, just while I've got this dark colour, I'm going to create a shadow underneath some of my cactuses. You could, if you want, do shadows coming downwards, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to do just a little bit of shadow underneath them all. And then, because that colour is really dark, I'm going to mix it into some white. So I've just got some of the lighter colour underneath it, which is just white basically that we've added to the colour. And I'm just going to make a softer colour. Still got plenty of the green, but because it's softer, I can just do little cactuses that are off into the distance. So again, just like using a softer colour for the mountains, by having more pastel colours, less harsh, more white in them, we can make these cactuses look further off. So again, it's not hard, there's no detail, it's the colour that is tricking your eye and creating the realism. So if you're painting along at home, this should be very easy. So take your time mixing the colours, and if you find they're a little bit too dark, you can always, when it's dry, just add some white to your paint and go over the top of them. So the same principle, look, we're just having different cactuses. I'm trying to make them all the different heights. Some with 2 arms, some with 3. You can even have some with 4 or 5. And we want some off really far into the distance. Look, just little lines. Some of that are quite big. We just want a nice variation. There we go. So easy. So as I say, less is more sometimes. We're going to put a few in the distance, but I don't want to cover up my sun, and I don't want to cover up all that hard work we do with our mountains. So again, have them at different heights. Have some really big, some really short. And you can even have some baby ones off into the distance. So I'm just putting some little tiny ones, little babies. That's sprouting up. Just putting a little bit more terrain. See, I can't help it. Even on a beginner's one, I always try to add more. Just a force of habit. So there we go. And then I'm just going to get some of this medium green and just a little bit of yellow. So I'm just mixing a softer colour. And I'm just going to put some little lines on my cactuses just to create some texture. So again, it really helps having a really thin brush. But all I'm doing, I'm just doing some straight lines coming down the canvas. I'm making sure I leave a tiny gap so some of that darker colour is shining through. And again, it just looks like the areas that are in the sunlight. So if you imagine the sun is coming from one side, so this side, the sunlight would be touching this sort of side. So I'm just using that really sharp edge of the brush. I'm leaving tiny gaps, just so it looks like lines are running down the cactus. It just gives it some texture. It's just really, really subtle. You'll barely notice it unless you're really close up. But it just creates another aspect of realism. So as I say, you can go as real or as detailed as you would like to at home. If you're just starting out, you don't necessarily have to do this stage. But if you do want to get more advanced, as I say, we try to cater for everyone here on the channel. So there we go. So just think where the light would be and just add some little highlights. And then just with my really dark shadow color, I'm just going to darken up some shadows here in the foreground. So just on this little cactus plant, just to make it stand out a little bit more. And again, just here in this corner, I want to make it really, really dark. So I always sign my paintings with a white pen, and I just use a fine liner pen because I find writing with a paintbrush really, really awkward and hard. So by having a dark corner and then using a bright white pen, I can have a lovely signature stand out against a dark surface, you see. And I think she's finished. So look, I've signed her with my pen in the bottom left hand corner. So you've got this lovely glowing sunset that you've learned how to blend, and then how to not get a green sky by having this sort of buffer zone, how to darken your corners to make your focus go towards the sun, how to push back far off mountains using pastel colours, and then how to create realistic darker mountains in the nearer, and then how to create terrain on your desert, and lastly how to paint cactuses. So a really easy desert tutorial for beginners, this lovely acrylic desert scene. So I hope you've enjoyed it. My name is Murray. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please support the channel. Thank you so much for everyone who tags me and sends me your version of the tutorials. They are fantastic, so well done. And any ideas for tutorials, put them in the comments below. So happy painting, and see you soon guys for the next lesson. Take care, see ya, bye.